So you can see I got the next part of my armature done so I can get the shoulders on this guy, and I've rolled up a couple of tubes to make the ever so important sternocleidomastoid that goes there behind the jaw, up by past the ear there, um, attaching in the cranium back there to the clavicle in the front. The sternocleidomastoid then overlaps the important lat, the latissimus dorsi there, and that combination of that triangle and that ropey muscle really do a lot to create that structure of the neck and give you what you need to find the right proportions. I'm finding myself putting in here and then dinking around trying to find the line of the clavicle. This isn't something that I do quickly like everything else. Dink, 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 dink around. But those are good things to keep in mind, though, when you're heading on to this next part of the portrait. And with everything we do here with this head, what we do on one side, we got to get on the other side, as tedious as that can be at times. One reason putting shoulders on and a neck is important when you're doing this kind of bust is that it actually changes the shape of the face. When you get those things on, it informs the jawline and the way that the jaw connects to the ear, and that kind of proportion and spacing, like every other part of a portrait, is informed by those parts around it. So really, not until we get that sternocleidomastoid do I get a better sense of his jowls and his jawline and his cheekbone. One of the most important parts of doing a portrait is this orientation, or the vertical orientation of the jaw relative to the more horizontal orientation. So I started out with a head that was sort of, I guess you would say, universal or templated. But then I'm adding on little bits and pieces as I go to get the muscles filled out, the muscles in the flesh. For example, the ever important orbicularis oculi around the eyes, and then the levators around the nose, and the zygomaticus major and minor on the cheeks. These little bits you kind of make into little teeny pieces of clay and add on. People want to start working in details. Everybody loves sculpting eyes, I think, but they are so challenging, and so is the nose. So these features are really made by all those muscles, all that flesh around the feature. So when you're working on that nose and you're working on the eye, you really got to make sure in that chin and around the mouth, where you get the orbicularis oris, we're looking for all those kinds of muscles, and that's what forms the features. Otherwise, we're going to have essentially a ball or some sort of a pancake with features sort of painted on them, and they won't have the kind of dimension we're looking for. This applies to sculpture, but it also is super relevant when you're doing painting and drawing, which actually is my usual medium. So now I've built all this muscle around the features. I'm actually getting in here and beginning to draw out the eyes with these X-Acto and other little sharp carving tool for detail. But I really did them and reworked them and did them and reworked them, putting that little ball in there and then working on those eyelids. Wasn't really working very well for me. It's such a small scale and such a tiny area for such an important feature. It's been a little bit of a challenge. So here we go. Time to start the hair. And I'm doing this little ropes. These Greek and Roman sculptures have this interesting approach to hair that I rather like. So I'm just made these little ropey things to begin with and moving them around the head, trying to find that hairline in just a really big, kind of a rough fashion. Like everything else when we're doing portraiture, we're working from the big stuff to the little stuff. Got to get the big things in first. So here we go, making all these little snakes and putting them around the head. So now I've got the hair just really roughed in and working on the hairline and carving back into it and getting some details in there. I also want to emphasize the importance of the mouth. That line of the mouth, especially in the corners of the mouth, is really what creates, I think, the expression more so than anything. You twist those corners just a little bit up or a little bit down or straight across, we really get a significant change in the feeling of the piece, what the person feels like a jerk, like this guy kind of looks like, or whatever. So I keep talking about how important it is to get the big stuff right before the details, and I couldn't help but notice that I messed up big time. I had to chop his head open and then fill it back up with a whole lot more aluminum because I didn't make his cranium big enough. And let this be a warning to you. Everybody underestimates the size of a cranium. Humans are such weird animals with our giant brains. So now I got him fixed up, his head anyway, and in the process I have to come back in here and begin smoothing and fixing everything else up around his head. So he's looking pretty good again. Got the last bit of armature done, and I squished his nose. So now I'm marking off where his ears go, and I squish these little teeny C-shaped pieces of clay up. And sorry for it being a bit off camera here, but I put those little cups, those little half-round cups on his ear, and then begin pushing it in and working it into place around the jaw. Getting some little details in there. This isn't as difficult as you might think. There's a little bit of detail in here, but really, I find it much more difficult to do this two-dimensionally with painting and drawing, say, than to do this with clay. The ears aren't all that terribly complicated, but it is fun getting them in after doing all the other hard work around the jaw, etc., and getting the hair in. So now I've got the clay around that last bit of the pedestal for him, and I'm just spending some time getting them all smoothed out, all those funny little lumps, all those little teeny unnecessary bits of irregularities. And this is kind of a satisfying part, and for the most part, your fingers work good for this. And I think I got a pretty good likeness. I don't really care. It doesn't look exactly like him. It's been a fun bit of a project, and I hope you enjoy doing yours. Thank you for watching.